So welcome for our lesson today, social study, and we are still continuing with that's our topic, political development and systems, and we looked at struggle for independence in Kenya. And then we talked about the political association. We looked at the demands of this political association. We also looked at the role of political association. We looked at some of their leaders, and then the reasons why they were made. And then also we talked about the Legislative Council. We said that Legislative Council was a form of parliament which was established. So we can see this procedure being followed towards the independence. We are still moving on. So Legislative Council, we talked about nominated members. We have also elected members. And then we had also talked about the role of Legislative Council. So today we are talking about what we call the struggle for independence in Kenya, and under that we shall look at the Second World War. So we shall discuss the Second World War, and we look at it, how it helped the Kenyans to fight for independence. Now, so we shall start here, that the struggle for independence in Kenya started when Harry Thuku formed what we call the East African Association. I think we said it was formed in 1921 by this man called Harry Thuku, mainly to fight for African welfare and so on. So that's when the struggle for independence began in Kenya. Then we are saying that these associations and their activities ended in 1939, and that marked the beginning of the Second World War. So the Second World War, when it began in 1939, then the colonial government banned all the political associations and parties in Kenya. So that's what marked the end of the political association, the beginning of the World War, the Second World War. So Second World War started in 1939 to around 1945. So we shall come to Second World War. So Second World War, it began in 1939 to 1945. So that's around 6 years online. So people were fighting. So it involved some blocks, fighting blocks. So mostly they were European powers. So we had Germany, Italy, then Japan on one side, that's one block. Then we had Britain, France, then the United States of America, that's USA, on the other side. So that's why I've written Germany, Italy, Japan versus Britain, France, and USA. So those are the two blocks that were involved in fighting in Second World War. Now, during that war, we are seeing these are European countries. But during that war, we are looking at Kenya. Not only Kenya, but we want to deal with Kenya. Africans were recruited to go and fight with the Europeans alongside in this war. So we are looking at Kenya. Very many Africans were recruited to go and fight in this war. That's why we are looking at the role of this war in the independence. So they went for war to fight. Then Africans who were recruited in Kenya, or Africans generally, they fought areas like Burma. So we had a country called Burma. That's in a nation country. Then we had India. They also fought in Egypt. Egypt is found in North Africa. Then we have Ethiopia. It's just our neighbor on the north of Kenya. So these are the areas where the Africans mostly fought in that war. So then Kenyan African soldiers who went for war, they were called King's African Rifles, KAR. So they are called King's African Rifles. Those are the Kenyan African soldiers who went to fight in this Second World War. Now, we want to look at the effects of Second World War. What has made it now to contribute to fighting for independence in Kenya, the effect. So number one, we are now looking at how does this Second World War help our members to fight for independence, or the soldiers. So number one, Africans realized that the Europeans were not superior. Because while they were at the war, they saw Europeans being shot dead, some were crying, some needed help. So they realized that the Europeans were not superior. But initially, we can see that the Africans, they used to fear Europeans. They used to see these people as very superior people. But when they went to war, then they saw these people being shot dead. Others were oozing out blood because of bomb blasts. So they realized that these people were not superior. So when they came back, they had that power to fight for independence without any fear. So that is role number one of Second World War in struggle for independence. Then number two, Africans witnessed the war in India and Burma, and they saw people of these countries, India and Burma, fighting for their independence with a lot of demands. So when they saw that, they came back in Africa or Kenya, then they saw that there was need to fight for independence. They witnessed Burma people and the Indian people fighting for independence with a lot of demands. So when they came back, there was need to fight for independence without any fear because what they saw in India and Burma. So that's point two. And then number three, Europeans started changing their attitudes towards Africans. European initially they saw Africans are a very primitive people, they cannot rule themselves. But when they saw Africans fighting very well in the field with a lot of technique, military technique and so on, so they realized that Africans were just normal human beings like them. So they started changing attitudes, bad attitude towards the Africans. So there was need for them to be given independence. So that one is also another point. And then we have another one, immediately after the Second World War, Pakistan and India, they gained their independence from their colonial masters. So this one encouraged the Africans when they came back after seeing that Pakistan and India have gained their independence immediately after the war, that is 1945. So they came being encouraged and they needed to fight for their independence. So that one was also another reason. The gaining of independence by the Pakistan and India was also another opportunity that gave Kenyans eager to fight for their independence. And then now we're also saying that another one, the Kenyan soldiers learned military skills like handling of guns, talk about handling of grenades, and then military techniques, training, and also fighting in the field. So when they came back, they could use these guns and all that technique, and they trained other people to fight for their independence. So the learning of skills was also very important because they learned why they were fighting. When they came back, they used the same skills to fight for these people. Then also they trained other Africans to fight for their independence. Then another one, while they were in the war, Africans or Europeans, Africans realized that the Europeans, especially the British, our colonial master, they did not want to be ruled by the French or Germany in the field. So they realized that even if the British did not want to be ruled, then it is good also the British not to rule Africans. So when they came back, they also started demanding for their rights to rule themselves. So that is the role of stroke of World War II in the struggle for independence. Then we want to look at then lastly, there was a very important point here. Now, what marked the end of the Second World War? The Second World War ended in 1945, we said 1945, and this was marked by the bombing of the two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the two cities of Japan, by the United States of America bomb. So the army or the military personnel from USA, they went in Japan, then they bombed two cities, that is Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. And they destroyed very many lives and very many buildings. So that one marked the end of the Second World War. So that's why when you see the Japanese people, they are highly affected by these bombs of 1945, which was dropped by the United States of America during the war. Now, the same 1945, there was formation of United Nations. The UN means United Nations. United Nations was formed in 1945 to replace, it only replaced what we call, allow me to wrap this. So, United Nations is a body that, or an organization that brings peace in the world. It replaced what we call the League of Nations. League of Nations was formed in 1919, after the Second World War. We know very well, the First World War, sorry. First World War, I think it began in 1914 to around 1918. So after the end of the First World War, there was what we call an organization called League of Nations, which was formed to keep peace in the world. So after the Second World War now, in 1945, the United Nations was formed to replace this. So the League of Nations was formed in 1999, but now, 1945, we see the United Nations being formed to replace this. Now, we want to look at the main role, the role of the United Nations. The role of United Nations. Role of United Nations, or the UN. So we have said UN was formed in 1945. Then it was the role why it was formed, or the function, is to keep peace in the world, to ensure that there is peace in the world, because lack of peace is what leads to start of war and so on. So this is the main reason for formation of UN, main. So the main role of UN was to keep peace in the world. Then number two, this is 1, 2, to rebuild those countries destroyed during the war. To rebuild those countries destroyed during the war. Like we have said, in 1945, Japan was highly affected. The two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was bombed by the US soldiers. So those were one of the countries that was destroyed during the war. So that was also another role of the UN, to rebuild those countries which were destroyed during the war. And then number three, to prevent another outbreak of another world war. To prevent the outbreak of another world war, that one was also another reason why the UN was formed. Then another one, number 4, to resettle the displaced by war. So we know very well during the war, we have people who run away for their safety. So those are the people displaced. We can call them internal displaced people, and so on, if they are within their country, or the refugees if they move to other countries. So the UN also wanted to settle these people to make sure they have at least a home, and then also medication services for the children to go to school and so on, to have food and so on. So that is the reason for formation of UN. So that is it is. So we have said the 1945, what marked the end of the Second World War, was the bombing of Japan. I think so. Also we want to look at, we have finished the Mau Mau, we want to look at the political organization in Kenya between 1945 to 1963. Then political association and movements in Kenya after Second World War, that's 1945 to around 1963. So we have what we call KASU. KASU in full means Kenya African Study Union. Kenya African Study Union. Then we have another one called KAU, Kenya African Union. Now, after formation of KASU, we shall look at that. There was the removal of the word study. That is now when we come back to do what we call KAU. Then also we have what you call Mau Mau movement. Mzungu aende Ulaya, Afrika apate uhuru. Mau Mau movement, we shall also look at that. Then we have Kadu, then also formation of KANU. But briefly, let us look at KASU. Now, after nomination of Eliud Matthew to the LegCo, we said the first African to be nominated to the LegCo was called Eliud Matthew. That is now Eliud Matthew. In which year? We said he was nominated in 1944. After nomination of Eliud Matthew in the 1944, Eliud Matthew alone could not understand African problems on the ground. So what happened? People came up, then people like Francis Hamisi, this one. So he formed what we call KASU, to assist Eliud Matthew to understand or study the African problems. That's why we are talking about the word study. So the main role of KASU was to assist Eliud Matthew in the LegCo to understand African problems on the ground. Now, in 1945, the colonial government forced the KASU members to abolish the word study. So it came back to what we call KAU. So KAU was now established just by removing the word study. Then James Kishuru in 1945 became the leader of KAU. That is what you're talking about. So remember that. This one was formed mainly to assist Eliud Matthew to fight for African problems. Now in 1945 the government advocated for removal of this, then it became to KAU. Mainly the main role of KAU also is just the same, to assist Eliud Matthew to fight for independence. Now briefly the last one, the role of KAU in struggle for independence, or let us look at the founder members first. We have James Kishuru, we have we have Otiende, then we have John Kibeso, we have also Francis Hamisi, S.O. Josiah, J. Jeremiah, Mulandi, S. D. J.K., Harry Thuku, and then we have somebody called Owino. Those are the founder members of KAU. Then lastly, the role of KAU. KAU. Number 1, to assist Eliud Matthew in LegCo to understand African problems. So the main role of KAU was to assist Eliud Matthew to understand the African problems in the ground. Then number 2, role of KAU was to unite Africans. To unite Africans. That is, it is so. We shall finish there. Then we shall continue with the other one next lesson. Thank you.